Good evening, friends. Good night, good morning. Here we are, another late night adventure into the other worlds, or one of the other worlds, several of the other worlds. I'd like to continue with Mr. Sculthorp's old book, Excursions into the Spirit World, I think will continue to be revealing to you. The Plane of Illusion. As I mentioned before, my travels became very different and at first were mostly to the lower spheres or dull states. But before coming back to my body, I was generally taken to a brighter locality or sphere. There is a reason for this, as the condition of the lower state is apt to cling, and this might produce a disagreeable after effect. Very true. When I arrived on a lower plane, I would at once know the nature of the place. Yes, one does get that way. The spirit body is very sensitive and one picks up the thoughts of the people there. The result is a sickening harshness which is indescribable. That's accurate, sickening harshness. The most depressing moments on earth cannot compare with it, as the physical mind cannot deal with the many thoughts at a time, whereas the spirit body is open to the mass thought of that particular state. Again, accurate. However, if I had to stay a while to witness something in these lower states, my spirit helper would neutralize these vibrations in some way. On most of these dull astral planes, I am invisible to the people there. The lower spheres are quite Earth-like, indeed, as you may have heard. There are cities, towns, villages, etc., which seem to be replicas of existing localities on Earth, and sometimes the conditions are similar to those on Earth. They are quite solid when the spirit body assumes the same wavelength. I have read these locations are formed naturally and automatically by the minds of the people who have passed to spirit life and expect to see their familiar surroundings. Yes. This seems to be true, and also that the mind has a photographic memory capable of reproducing all the details. To cite an example, I have seen lampposts in the street, which would hardly be necessary, as I've never seen darkness of light there. Regarding this creative power of unconscious thought, I thought once I was talking to a teacher in spirit, and he asked, "Where do you get your clothes?" I tried to remember my tailor's name on earth and could not. But this was not what he meant. He said, "Look," and pointed at my clothes. I looked down and saw that I was wearing my everyday clothes, reproduced in every detail, even to small stains that were on them, the result of a too vigorous squeezed tube of toothpaste, which I had not been completely able to remove. In these spheres, the spirits are in varying degrees of ignorance. Some have not the slightest idea that they have left the earth and are in the great beyond. Others have some sort of impression that they are living in a different life, but it is dreamlike and not positive. These people have earned over the same ideas and carried them, which they had on earth, and the spirit is just as vague to them as on earth, for their surroundings are quite earth-like. A lot of them, you can't convince they're dead for that very reason. Without my experiences and other knowledges, I believe that I would be just as vague and uncertain, as sometimes I have not become fully conscious at once when arriving on a plane and thought I was on Earth. Then gradually what I had previously learnt seemed to filter through, and I would become conscious and know. I'm sure some of you have had this experience. Many spirits seem quite contented and they feel well and do not tire, but their minds do not seek for or they do not know of anything better, nor can they be pushed forward. Yes, self-satisfaction. The spirit law seems to be that the urge must come from within, which will happen in time, of course. As the ingrained thought of many is their livelihood, this habit continues, and I have seen all manner of occupations: road making, factory work, bridge building. I've even seen coal miners riding on their small trucks and singing cheerfully. In one factory, I watched a welder at work. His arc was a small spot of light needing no eye shade, but he thought he was welding. He looked up at me and said, "Do you work here?" I answered, "No, I'm having a look around." In spirit, thought seems to be solidified and thus become things. Later, when progress is made and God-given gifts will be used directly. One of our well-known psychics, Frederick Myers, in a communication after his passing, that would be the early 30s, I think, gave this state the very apt name, the plane of illusion. Many seem to think that every trip to the next world must be full of excitement, with many new wonders and strange things to be seen, but this is not always so. In my early projections, I was taken to the low or unprogressed states many times, and as these are just like Earth and the inhabitants do not know anything otherwise, the activities were often banal and boring. But I had to learn. Many times I have felt the necessity that all should have some knowledge of spirit life already during their earthly pilgrimage. For instance, it did not seem very edifying when I was hurried to a dull state to listen, invisibly to them, to the conversation between two charwomen in the middle of a deserted school playground. They were school cleaners and were full of grumbles and bitterness towards another charwoman who had the job of cleaning the school, which they considered should have been given to them. Oh, doesn't that sound typical? This is the plane of illusion with all its drabness, and I should hardly think that any spirit children went to that school. This, however, would not seem strange to the cleaners, as they are concerned only with empty schools. Oh, great line. The spirit factories I have seen were all overstaffed with work people, and there was no system or production line. Each one seemed to be doing something that either he knew best or wanted to do, and all were content to be in a regular job. It is interesting to note that although ingrained thought of work is uppermost and is carried over by some, so is the lazy habit of having a mic. I wonder what that means. And I saw plenty of it round the benches, or maybe asleep or something. A place where there were no foremen would be no doubt a worker's utopia. Near Christmas, I was once projected to a factory in spirit where I watched some men painting children's toys, and it seemed that the early thoughts of the festive season are reflected in the next world. Yes, there are other examples of this channeled. Outside the factory, there was a large sports ground in the middle, of which they were erecting a big and substantial-looking stage. As I was wondering what this was for, my guide quietly remarked, "For the workers' amusement." On 2 occasions in this world where thoughts are things, I have seen butchers' shops. In a land where the slaughter of animals is not possible, this may sound surprising even to those with some knowledge of spirit. They are purely the result of thought and looked at just as substantial as anything else. Where thought reigns, who can put a limit to thought? There were simply the earth-like ambitions of the butchers to have a well-stocked shop, capable of satisfying all their customers' demands. They were small shops, and the entire fronts were hung with meat, just as we used to see before the new food laws were introduced. Oh, isn't that quaint? The colour of the meat was a brilliant red, and in one case almost the hue of crimson lake, which was perhaps their idea of a perfect meat. This plane of illusion in which many spirits live for long periods may seem strange to many, to us on earth, but those who have sat in rescue circles will know the many cases where a spirit, on being told that he or she has passed over, emphatically denies it at first. This is one of the reasons why rescue circles are held by spiritualists, trying to enlighten those backward spirits. In one experience connected with those still living in this plane of illusion, I once became conscious in projection on the deck of a fully rigged sailing ship of the 19th century. I had been planted near one of the great masks, and as I became aware of things, I was surprised at the number of ropes coming down from aloft, and the term knowing the ropes acquired a new significance. I walked over to a deck house close by, and in it were a few men, all grumbling about their living quarters. I sensed that they thought they had not long left port and had been put in the deck house. I looked in it and saw the bunks and told them it wasn't so bad, but they would not be consoled and were thinking of possible stormy weather ahead. It would have been interesting to ask those men when they last saw a storm or did a night watch. But I was not impressed, too, but perhaps because it had been tried before without effect. Certainly their grievances would appear real, as the place was not a good teak-built affair, but more of a ship's carpenter's emergency job, and did not look very weatherproof. But one could no more tell these men that they were spirits than the man in the street could be convinced in a few words about his life in the beyond. In my early projections to the lower planes, I was often taken to a place just in time to witness some occurrence, and it seemed as if my teachers were fully aware of what was going to happen. Also, I was often found to be waiting outside an office with the feeling that my spirit helper had gone inside for orders, and I would be made unconscious and hurried to the spot. In the dull astral towns, I often saw certain men neatly dressed in ordinary clothes, but their features and eyes had a brightness and perfection that made them outstanding in such a locality. I sensed them to be advanced helpers on their various missions, and once saw the protective powers they possessed. I was once taken to one of these towns and stationed in the middle of a marketplace. A man was standing on a box addressing a crowd, and he seemed well pleased by his ability to keep the people amused with his jokes and antics. One of the helpers was passing by, and the man saw him. A look of intense hatred appeared on his face, and he called to him with a coarse expression. The helper stopped and turned to him with a grave look and said, "Do not insult me." The result was surprising. The man collapsed as if all strength was taken from him, and disappeared from view at the foot of a crowd. The helper went on his way and turned a corner. Soon the man struggled to his feet and saw that it was quite safe to shout a further insult, and then resumed his antics with the crowd. On another occasion, I was put in the middle of a miserable-looking street which I thought was part of London in the 19th century. I saw a sad-looking little peddler going from house to house with his bag, and watching him was a proud and petulant-looking Victorian dandy, still with his side whiskers and in the clothes of the period. Suddenly he strode over to the peddler and deliberately stamped on his foot. Deliberately, really. The peddler cried out in pain and clutched his foot. As he did so, his boot disappeared, and I saw that he was grasping his bare toes, which were bleeding. I confronted the dandy and said, "Why did you do that?" He turned away, muttering, "He annoys me." I looked toward the peddler. He was recovering from his upset, and his book reappeared on his foot. Then he picked up his bag and continued on his round. The incident of apparent injury and pain surprised me, but the explanation I sensed from my helper was as follows. The stronger mind overcame the weaker and wished to cause pain. The peddler thought he was hurt. He wanted to grasp his toes and automatically obliterated the boot. The pain was such that he thought there must be blood, so blood appeared. On my intervention, the thought of giving pain was diverted from the peddler, and he quickly recovered. This expectation and producing is very strange. Once I was waiting outside an office in the lower state I previously mentioned, the same office, and there was several others waiting. Forgetting where I was, I put my hand in my pocket, got a cigarette, lit it up, and puffed. It tasted horrible, like burning rags, and I threw it away in disgust. A young man standing by me said, "Try it again," and I replied, "No, it's only an earthly habit." The strange point about this incident is that if my expectation produced the desired cigarette, why did it not also produce the desired taste? Or did my guide play a trick on me? Later I remembered that I saw no flame on my lighter, nor have I ever seen a consuming flame in spirit. Perhaps the ethereal substance in spirit, being an original element, cannot be further broken down, And this may also be the reason why one never sees decaying vegetation in spirit. I was taken to another dull and unprogressed state and saw a group of people waiting outside the door of a long hut. A teacher conducted me through the people and the closed door. This always surprises me in the lower planes because I never know where I'm visible or when. Inside the hut were long rows of plates, tables with long rows of plates. Each plate had one slice of bread and a small portion of jam on it. Sounds very much like the Depression or the war, doesn't it? I was told that these people had been some time in spirit but were quite ignorant of the fact, and the meagre ration was an endeavour to wean them from desire for food. Outside at the back of the hut, a dowdy-looking woman was attending to a portable boiler. She was stoking it with wood and smoke was issuing, but I could see no flames. When a low cloud of smoke whirled around us, I said to the woman, "Looks like a house fire. I expect you have a good fire brigade in the district?" The implications of this remark struck me some time later, but my conscience was quite clear. I am sure I was prompted to this remark by my helper. When I sat on a box, a very small boy sidled up to me. He smelled as if he had been rolling in a sewer. He wanted to talk to me, but I hurriedly said there was not time. When I looked at his face, I saw that he was not a boy, but a little wizened old man with a stunted spirit body. That's not uncommon. Many years ago, I was taken to a very dull state, so dark it was almost like dusk. There were miserable-looking buildings like warehouses, and in one I saw a line of servicemen handling their kits, which were being stacked in piles. I was told that they were passing into better conditions. I approached one soldier I had known on earth and asked him if there were any more of our men there. He was startled and frightened and looked wildly around, and then I realized he could not see me, although he had heard my voice. Yes, you have to practice various levels of manifestation to be effective there. When you're starting out, you don't always realize that. Being invisible, I've often been walked through. This has no effect on the spirit body. So that's enough of that for now. I can get the impression. And he does go to higher states, which are very interesting also. But if you're starting out and you wind up in one of these lower planes, expect it to be earth-like and people to be, narrow-minded, ignorant. You'll probably know more than any of them. You'll be the wise guy, the one-eyed man in the land of the blind, for sure. So with that as an introduction, let me remind myself of at least one issue that came up, the challenging of a more powerful thought over a weaker one. I was doing a house clearing, many years ago, at least 15, 20 years ago. A malevolent spirit was haunting this apartment where several women shared a place, and one of them told me about it. And I initially cleared the place by playing a Beethoven symphony very loud. Spirits don't like spiritual music, they don't like powerful music. And it was my intuition that would work, and it did. And but I was still relatively naive, and when I came back home by vehicle, in a 1 hour drive or whatever, I got to my place and realized that this haunting spirit had come with me. And I went, oh no, that was foolish. I should have banished him at the time, but I didn't. But so I had a bit of a tussle, a power struggle. And I was able to manifest a stronger power and move him on. But initially, he had a sort of a big body, like a muscular man, but not an athlete, but, big and tough looking. And my energy treatment was sort of treated him like I was pricking a balloon with a needle. And the energy went into him and he sort of deflated. Not into nothing, but into a little shrunken man. And I thought, oh yeah, often these malevolent spirits are all hot air. And you have to see through their game and realize that you, as a helping spirit, a healing spirit, are more powerful. And you can call on energies that they cannot call on. So it was a small example, but it's vivid in my mind, as you can see, from 20 years ago. At least 20 years ago, if not longer. And, an example of, you're learning. You're getting better all the time. And I employ it now because I didn't put it in any of my early books. I put other examples in there, but I didn't put that one in. And obviously felt inspired there, suddenly recalled it. So the spontaneous projection is, we're continuing on with that, and feeling out the various aspects and possibilities of such an exercise. Using the imagination to project, and then realizing that the imagination is much, much more than the skeptics would have you believe. You are reasserting your ability to do this, the sort of thing that you do when you're unconscious and projecting in sleep. And either do not recall at all or have very vague memories, and, analyze it and tell yourself, oh no, that was a dream, but, maybe a vivid dream, but I don't remember it that well. And I have to, unless you put it down in your dream journal, you're going to forget it. Well, these conscious projections that I'm hoping to demonstrate vividly, trusting that you will understand that, is something of importance. And I might mention, if you've been watching, are we number 4 or number 5 right now? I think we're number 5. Something I mentioned a couple of nights ago. I was asked by a regular recent client to contact a deceased family member that they hadn't seen in some time and were wondering about. And the person who had passed as a child but is now a young man chose to take the childhood image that I had been presented with in an email and modify it to some degree and turn it into an image of Prince Harry, the one that we're familiar with, particularly from his book, and And he did this and was chuckling away, and I saw right away the game he was playing and congratulated him. And later, when I was mentioning this by email to the client, I was told, my goodness, he was often mistaken for Prince Harry when he was a child. And we in fact were talking about that and how he liked to play the Prince Harry thing. And this is in another country at breakfast time when I was in the middle of the night having this experience. So you have this, this verification, which one doesn't always get. And the whole Prince Harry thing was something of great amusement to us all. And I just wanted you to know that. You, as you do your practice, your own experimentation, you will get some verifications of one kind or another. And they help cement into place the reality of what you're doing. I got many years ago, of course, I think it's covered in my second book, you get enough verifications, this was like 20, 25 years ago, where you go, all right, that is what I'm doing. Of course it is what I'm doing. And then you stop thinking about it and just get on with the business. I'm in one of the, what we would call lower astrals. These are beyond the hell realms, which really are truly unpleasant. This is one of these sort of scruffier places. And I'm watching a man lean into the hood of a car. And I'm trying to, yeah, and of course, being a guy, I'm now trying to figure out what kind of car it is. And it looks like something from the 1960s. But, you know, my identification skills are meager. And he's leaning in, you know, tools in hand. And he senses my presence, perhaps because I'm sending a little energy toward him. I'm about 50 feet away, or no, 30 feet away, in front of a dwelling with a not very well... Oh, no, he's in the driveway, sorry. And the garden is, well, he hasn't bothered with that. I think he passed on and his wife's not there, or a wife that would be looking after the garden is not there. And he looks up, looks at me, sort of, yeah, and what do you want? And I said, oh, sorry, I'm just passing through and I saw you there and thought I'd stop and say hello. Oh, okay. Well, hello. And he then goes back to his car. I notice over the side of the car there's a sort of a leather or no rubber sort of mat that he might use to lie on when he gets underneath there. And he's in sort of weekends, you know, scruffy clothes that you would use to, that you wouldn't mind getting oil on and stuff. And I know he's dead. And I know he's partially created a thought form of a car that he has in his garage in the world. And is wondering why his efforts to get it running are, you know, failing. But, you know, he's done this kind of work before, and he's sort of puzzled and annoyed, but not defeated. And he doesn't really want me around, so I move on. So let's go on. And it looks like an old subdivision, one where in times of economic distress, i.e. not now, where I live now, you know, the small houses are taken down, purchased and taken down, and bigger houses are put up in their place. It's not a time of economic distress of that nature, and hasn't been for some time. But this is caught in a time frame, this neighbourhood in the Lower Astral, where I'd say it feels like late 50s, early 60s to me. And the car looked like a, you know, what was that, a 61 Ford or a 63? I know people that will know instantly what it was, and I'm not that good. But so I'm walking on, and I hope you're with me. And, you know, a down at heels subdivision where there's no profit in renovating or reselling or, you know, any of that sort of thing. And the houses are allowed to decay. And people have this sort of, they've died that way, and they take their sense of hopelessness and struggling along from week to week and fixing things as they break with, you know, whatever they can find, bits of wood and paint and stuff, and hoping for better times. And, you know, but accepting the fact that what seems like a reality, and not knowing that they can fix things by thought at all. And this guy, I could definitely tell he was missing his wife, but trying not to think about it. And, you know, maybe they weren't like the most loving couple in the world, but he did sort of miss her. You know, I think he missed the practical things that she would do rather than the, her, you know, what would we New Agers say, her manifestations of the divine feminine. No, he wasn't thinking of that at all. And I was thinking of that the other day, as it's a lovely spring here where I live. And when you're out and about in town in this pleasant spring weather, the ladies are manifesting aspects of the divine feminine in their new summer outfits, and they're looking lovely. And I was thinking, aren't they beautiful? And, you see that aspect, that radiance of the divine feminine, whether they're 15 or 45 or 60 or whatever, they're beautifully dressed and they're walking along, smiling and chuckling and telling stories. And it's just a lovely moment. Anyway, he wasn't thinking that way, I can tell you. And so back to this level. What are we seeing here? Well, more sort of, we're not talking condemned houses, we're talking decrepit. Things like, geez, I could use a lick of paint, that kind of thing. And look at that roof. Oh, is it leaking? And, the eaves and the moss on the eaves and, this stuff. And I don't see any broken windows, but sure, they don't look in good shape at all. And I wonder what they do when it rains. And all that sort of normal thinking I'm doing it, but accepting it, And, okay. An older lady on her knees in the garden, and she's using a little hoe to scrape up the soil, and she might have some seeds by her side. Look like she's figured out how to manifest seeds, or maybe she's bought them somewhere, somebody else. Oh, I'm getting, no. There's some shops run by, as Sculthorp as progressed spirits, where they can buy what they think they can buy, and some places are selling seeds, and or giving them away. And this lady's planting some seeds and thinking, oh, at least I can spruce this place up a bit. And although I will have to wait a couple of months, but so she's busy doing that, and I'm trying to think of this kind of dress that she's got, a sort of a baggy flower print dress with an apron in front, and she gets no, she hasn't got socks on, but she's got old worn shoes on, and the sort of things that she would wear in her garden on Earth, and she's died and doesn't know it, and thinks she's still an old lady struggling with her garden. And in fact, she is. In her mind, she is. And I tried to be cheerful and, call out, hello there, how you doing? And I refrained from saying, isn't it a lovely day? Because it's kind of dull and cloudy. And she looks up and sort of stares at me like, who are you? And she said, yes, hello. How are you? And then goes back to her thinking, or her hoeing and putting seeds in little holes and stuff, and being busy with that. And it was how was it? And it wasn't even an effort at being sociable; it was a response. And I'm now thinking, I'm lucky she said anything at all. And I thought, well, let's just move on. And I'm passing other houses where there's no visible human stuff going on. And that doesn't mean they're not, they could easily be inside trying to make a meal, or, throwing things together, and wondering where that pot came from. Where did that pot come from? Oh, there's a kettle, and they've been there a while. They've got the means to live a meager life, and things were not good when they died, and they're not much better now. Okay, I'm in. Somebody's running a shop in a house. I noticed there was some signs outside. A few of those brand signs. How little stores have signs of famous brands, and I think they get a little money to put them on the wall and stuff. You see it a lot. I see a little store that in my neighbourhood on the main street, or one of the main streets. It's an okay store. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's got an old Coca-Cola sign on the wall. It's been there for years, and something you don't see in other parts of town, but you see it there, and so it makes me think of that, and I go in and there's shelves and racks of this, that, and the other, all the usual stuff that you would find in one of these basic variety stores. And there's a guy behind the counter, and he's expecting me to buy something, and he's thinking, if I don't watch him, he's going to steal something. And I'm thinking, I wonder how I look. Have I still got my long hair? And I think, oh yeah, I've still got my long hair. I should have been more careful with that. And so I nose around and I look at this, that, and remind myself of what these stores sell, which is, well, I don't know, I see greeting cards. I see sheaves of paper, the sort of thing, notebook paper. I see candy. I see, cigarettes, of course. No, they're behind the counter. And I should mention with the Sculthorp thing, lots of people still smoke there. It's one of the most common addictions, and they so even on the lower planes, they can manifest a cigarette just because they think it ought to be there, and they do it without realizing it, and the lighter or whatever, and somehow it seems easier than manifesting, whatever, coffee, whiskey, food. I don't know. It's so automatic. Anyway, I see cigarettes behind the counter. And this could be a store run by a slightly more elevated spirit. And as I look at him, his look of suspicion sort of melts a little bit. And I think he realizes who I am. And he goes, yes, I understand. You're a visitor, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am a visitor. And I'm taking some people who will become conscious of a YouTube video and follow into this imaginative realm in their own meditations, and you might see them later. And just kind of showing them around, And he said, of course, good for you. And you won't get too much reaction around here. They're all pretty set in their ways. And I say, yes, I understand. But I respect your commitment to running the store and putting in your time here. And he smiles and says, yeah, I do my shift. We take turns. I don't have to be here all the time. And the next guy that comes will look almost exactly like me. And they think it's the same person here all the time and feel sympathy for me. And that empathy, because I'm a hard worker like them and I never leave the store and I'm so committed, and it's a rotten society, and as working class people have to stick together and all that kind of stuff. It helps because it breeds a little empathy in their rather hard-hearted, narrow-minded attitudes, And and I said, okay, I get it. Well done. Classic. Why didn't I think of that? And he just smiles again and says, why don't you take a paper? You'll look like a normal person. So I say, okay, and I grab this paper, and it's a newspaper. And it's called what's it called? No, is it called Starry Night? I guess it is. Anyway, it looks like a tabloid, and it has a lot of that tabloidy stuff on it. Sure enough, there's a rape on the first story, and there's another murder story. And what do I see? More lousy weather on the way. Anyway, all this negative stuff. And I said, is this for real, or are you guys making this stuff up? Oh, he says, oh no, we're making it up because that's what they want to see, and that's what they expect to see. And so there's all these, I said, there's all this like fake stories. I said, well, yeah, he said, it's easy. We just take the day-to-day stuff from Earth and morph it a little bit. Doesn't take, we've got one guy that's great at it. He does it in seconds. And I said, okay, I see. Clever again. So I said, best wishes and see you later. And I walk out the store.